This is the Cameroon Radio Television. This is Globe Watch, and this is Charles Bune with the pioneer edition of the program for 2017. The former United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Antonio Guterres, has taken office as the new Secretary General of the United Nations, replacing former South Korean Foreign Affairs Minister Ban Ki-moon. Donald Trump will be sworn in less than 3 weeks from now as the next President of the United States of America. Both leaders are inheriting a world suffering from a multitude of crises: the migrant crisis, the refugee crisis, and a sick global economy. One of the issues they will be handling is balancing the equation of peace across the world, and one topic will come under scrutiny as the year ended: the old-age Israeli-Palestinian conflict, in whose United Nations latest resolution has slammed a blow on Israel, calling on the State of Israel to immediately cease the occupation of East Jerusalem and other Palestinian territories. The reaction from Tel Aviv and from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in particular has been swift and immediate. This is a shameful move. So, what next, as the year promises to be a very stormy one in terms of peace? My guest today on Globe Watch and the pioneer for 2017 is Israel's chief diplomat in Cameroon. Ryan Gidor, welcome to Globe Watch.
Thank you very much.
Are you a stable, morally stable Israeli diplomat in the early hours of 2017?
I've never been asked this question before. I suppose you will have to ask my wife whether I'm morally stable, but I'd like to think that we as professional civil servants and diplomats can cope with any kind of diplomatic difficulty and sometimes even serious misunderstandings on a bilateral level.
Oh, well, I wonder if you are really coping with the latest round of diplomatic drama between the United Nations Organization and Israel, and the latest has been Resolution 2334, calling on Israel, quote, to cease all settlement activities in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. And the reaction from Tel Aviv was raw. Why?
Well, the reaction from our government in Jerusalem was quite emotional, and I think it's understandable because when you look at the full range of wars and crises that have kept the world and indeed the Security Council busy over the past year alone, first and foremost, of course, the war in Syria. In the past few weeks, we've seen thousands of people being massacred in Aleppo and elsewhere, and the world has done very little to prevent this. Not to mention the war against Boko Haram in Central and Western Africa, not to mention other crises all over the world. Yet the only issue on which the Security Council can find unanimity and come together is Israel and Palestine. And in Jerusalem, it was felt that this was somewhat hypocritical.
You know why? Because this issue has been going on for decades, and the Israelis have not stopped occupying territories which do not belong to them. Why are you afraid to go back to the 1967 borders?
Well, you are right in that the Israeli-Palestinian issue has been around, it's been on the table for many decades. But there are other conflicts that have been there even longer. For example, the conflict in Northern Ireland that's been around for centuries, not to mention other parts of the world. However, you are asking why Israel is not doing anything. Well, I beg to disagree. Israel has evacuated the Gaza Strip back in 2005 and pulled out every single Jewish settlement that used to exist there. Even now, the Israeli government in the same way as all previous Israeli governments have done, the current Israeli government has not annexed the West Bank and the Palestinian territories. We are acknowledging the fact that this is one of the issues that will have to be discussed as part of a peace process between Israel and the Palestinians, alongside security, terrorism, water resources, and many others.
I'm just surprised when you say that Israel has not annexed, or the current administration is not doing anything to intrude or to carry out incursions into Palestinian territories. But you know, former Globe Watch guest and the outgoing ambassador of the United States to the United Nations, Samantha Power, said the United States of America abstained from defending Israel in this particular resolution because, quote, of facts on the ground. And the reality is roughly 500,000 Israelis are living in Palestinian occupied territories in East Jerusalem in over 140 settlements. And the Obama administration insisted that you guys cannot continue to build settlements and talk of a two-state solution. Why these double standards?
I fully agree that there have been changes on the ground because Israel has been present there for 50 years, since the 1967 war. However, as I said before, we have not yet annexed officially. We have not yet applied Israeli legislation in the West Bank, which suggests that we acknowledge the fact that this is...
West Bank, yeah. I'm principally concerned with the city of Jerusalem and East Jerusalem in particular, and you know how much that particular portion of the territory is in the souls and minds of Palestinians.
Well, the city of Jerusalem is in the soul and minds of billions of people all over the world, not just Palestinians. And the city of Jerusalem has been the historic capital of the Jewish nation for 3,000 years, long before any other religion or ethnic group has developed any kind of emotional or historical or collective affiliation with the city of Jerusalem. So the Jews have been there for 3,000 years, and I think the way Israel has been conducting its affairs in Jerusalem since its inception in 1948 suggests and indeed demonstrates that we acknowledge the importance of this city for the rest of the world. Never in the history of Jerusalem before 1948, and certainly not 1967, has it been so free and accessible to members of all the religions, all denominations, and all the ethnicities.
This is what one senior Israeli official said just after the resolution was adopted. Quote, blaming the American administration, your best ally. Quote, the U.S. administration secretly cooked up with the Palestinians an extreme anti-Israeli resolution behind Israel's back, which would be a tailwind for terror and boycotts and effectively make the Western Wall in Jerusalem, end of quote. You blatantly, without any iota of diplomacy, say Obama has abandoned Israel, and Benjamin Netanyahu, your prime minister, qualified it a shameful move. Were you surprised that the Americans could do this?
I think many people in...
I should tell my audience that out of the 15 members of the United Nations Security Council, 14 overwhelmingly voted against you people. America said, let me have some sleep. Please deal with Israel.
Well, of course, you know, we are not naive in Israel. I've been a professional diplomat for over 21 years. We are not unaware of the position of the international community on the issue of the settlements.
Do you confirm to me that the Americans worked on this resolution? Because publicly it was proposed by the Egyptians, and Israeli officials say that this is the handiwork of the Obama administration based on intelligence provided to them by Mossad, Israel's security agency. Is that correct? Is it true that the Obama administration worked on this?
I have no personal knowledge of this. You are quoting some sources, very senior sources in Jerusalem, and your quotes are absolutely accurate, but I don't have any personal knowledge, and I'm not in a position to confirm or corroborate.
You must have a very rough relationship with your Egyptian and American colleagues in Yaoundé, for example. After that resolution, have you spoken to any of them?
I speak to them on a daily basis, but again, we professional diplomats are very experienced at separating policy matters and personal relations. We keep them separate, otherwise we wouldn't be diplomats. We would be just ordinary members of the public who let their emotions and private political persuasions to take over. So we keep it separate, and the whole point about diplomacy is building bridges and finding out a creative, imaginative way to bypass bilateral crisis and continue plowing on in order to achieve reconciliation.
You have halted, the Israeli government has halted relations with 12 nations at the UN Security Council that backed that resolution, and you have kept 3 aside. I don't know if you are still cooperating with the Russians, the Americans, and the Senegalese. And Donald Trump said, quote, "The Israelis shouldn't be worried, they should remain strong. After January 20, things will be different at the United Nations. You have already stopped funding roughly 5 UN agencies. 2017 would simply mean the year the United Nations will see an Israeli exit."
As usual, Charles, you've done your research and your homework, your questions are very challenging, but let me rise up to the challenge. I have to stress 2 points. First of all, on a bilateral issue between Israel and the United States of America. All friends, even close allies, sometimes experience bilateral crisis. Even Cameroon has sometimes had bilateral crisis with its neighbors, such as Nigeria. This is a part and parcel of international diplomacy and international relations. America has always been and will always remain Israel's strongest and staunchest ally. We've had our disagreements, we will move on. We had fantastic relations with consecutive American administrations, both Republican and Democrat, and I have no doubt that our relations with the Trump administration will be a very fruitful one. As for the UN has created the State of Israel. The State of Israel was conceived as a result of a UN General Assembly vote in 1947, and we are cognizant of that.
And so will be the Palestinian state, right?
Only the future can tell that. But the problem is that the UN is the sum total of its players, and within the UN, and this is something I feel very passionate about because in my previous capacity before coming to Yaoundé, I was the director of the UN Political Affairs Department at the Israeli Foreign Ministry. Within the UN, there's an automatic majority against Israel because of the numbers. So if tomorrow...
Why do you think that people are against you?
You know what, more often than not, it's nothing to do with us. It's only the lowest common denominator. If a group of, say, the Organization of Islamic Countries, or even the African Union, okay, they can't agree on many other burning issues. The one thing they can only agree on is Israel and Palestine. Do you know the latest summit meeting of the Africa Union produced only one statement on a regional conflict? Not any regional conflict in Africa, and we don't know that there are many regional conflicts in Africa. Only in Israel and Palestine. Well, why is that? Because all the members of the Africa Union could reach a consensus only in something which was unrelated to their own domain, Israel and Palestine. And this happens in the United Nations.
You know, the words of Benjamin Netanyahu have been so hard on the American administration. John Kerry, a few days ago, the outgoing UN Secretary of State, declared that friends need to tell friends the truth face to face. And that truth is, Israel cannot continue to occupy territories which do not belong to them. And they are the first to clamor for a state two-state solution, and that they are shocked by the words of Netanyahu because there is no American administration in the history of the creation of Israel which has worked so much for the security of the state of Israel more than the Obama administration. And the best illustration is the latest 38 billion arms memorandum of understanding for the state of Israel. Why do you treat America with this scorn?
I think that the level of intimacy between Israel and America is such that sometimes when we have our very rare disagreements, it becomes very emotional. It's like a married couple, that the kind of arguments you have with the person who is closest to you sometimes manifests itself in very emotional outbursts. But this is the exception to the rule. This, as you yourself said, the kind of support and aid that America extends to Israel is a clear indication for the fact that the relationship is still very sound and very fruitful.
You spoke a while ago of working with Donald Trump, the next chief tenant of the White House, and he's a very good user of Twitter. And at the moment the resolution was passed, he said Israel has been treated, quote, by the Obama administration with disdain and disrespect. But I just wonder the kind of cooperation we enjoy with Donald Trump. This is a candidate who was elected into office on the basis of the non-respect of the traditional way of doing business. And the traditional way of doing business is that America should always defend Israel. And Donald Trump will certainly come and say that we must destroy that tradition. Can you really count on a president who says yes in the morning, in the evening he says no, and at 10 p.m. he says we can do both?
Well, you know, it's not for us to determine the outcome of the American elections. America is a stable, respectable democracy. And of course, just like the rest of the world, we respect the choice made by the American electorate. And this is the administration we will have to work with. Now, we all know that during election campaigns...
You know the background of the coming Secretary of State, right? The CEO of ExxonMobil, the world's largest energy company, and all he knows is oil, oil, oil. And Israel, all what she knows is security, security, security.
I think that the kind of opinions and emotions and statements that I expressed during a very, very tempestuous, stormy election campaign are not necessarily indicative of the policy that the administration will actually adopt upon taking power. We've seen it time and again, not just in America, in Israel, in France, in the UK. You rightly mentioned the fact that this new administration in the United States is somewhat unorthodox in its approach, but this is part of a trend that we've been seeing elsewhere in the world in the past few years. Look at France, look at the UK post-Brexit, look at the Netherlands, look at Poland, Hungary. So I think mankind, civilization, human society have to come to terms with the new form and new face of politics that are largely determined by social media. And the new politician, the new brand of politicians, they talk over the old orthodox traditional forms of media, such as CRTV, such as BBC, CNN, and they apply directly to the public through the means of Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And this is the kind of new reality that diplomats, politicians, and the media will have to come to terms with.
Probably will be separating soon. You see, weeks from now, there will be a next round of negotiations for the Israeli-Palestinian discussion, and that will be taking place in Paris, France. And the French have said that what happened in the United Nations was a just, comprehensive, and lasting solution to ensure that there is a Palestinian state living side by side with the state of Israel, which the Americans call the old democracy in the Middle East. Will Israel participate in the next round of talks?
I doubt it very much. After the latest Security Council resolution, Israel is extremely mistrustful of the international community and what would be put on the table. However, I would not like personally to preempt any kind of...
Do you understand why you use the word distrust? It's simply because you guys have abused their trust too. They tell you don't do this and you do that.
Well, Charles, you know, in the international affairs and relations, and
there are no friends, there are no permanent enemies, there are no permanent friends.
Israel has won tremendous respect from the international community for consecutive acts of diplomacy and policy. I mentioned before the evacuation of all 22 Israeli settlements from the Gaza Strip in 2005. Israel handed back the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt in return for peace. Israel launched the Oslo peace process in 1993, for which our Prime Minister Rabin was assassinated. So Israel does not shy back from sacrifices and compromises. In this case, we have said time and again, we are prepared to discuss the issue of settlement, but it can't be the only issue on the table. It has to be discussed side by side with security, with terrorism, with Jerusalem, with water resources, all of that. The international community, and in this respect, Charles, I refer you to the statement coming of 10 Downing Street, British Prime Minister Theresa May only yesterday, that said exactly the same. She said, we are against settlement construction. However, this is not the only issue on the table. That we, the international community, have to pay attention to other issues. Plus, Theresa May, the British Prime Minister, said, I take issue with the fact that the international community is criticizing the democratically elected composition of the Israeli government. We work with whoever is elected democratically, be it Israel, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, or elsewhere. And this is what we have, and this is how we have to find out ways for making progress.
Let me just paraphrase the reaction of the Palestinian officials, and more particularly the reaction of Erekat, who is the chief negotiator for the Palestinian. And he said that this is what we have been expecting from everybody across the world. And this time, the Israelis will understand that nobody is in favor of them. When you will be isolated completely, you know very well there will be a vote at the United Nations General Assembly very soon to proclaim the existence of a Palestinian state, just like they did for you people in 1948. What will you do after that?
First of all, I don't know what we would do after that, because that's for the government to decide.
The confusion is total, right?
The confusion is not total, because this is something that has been on the table for a few years. And as I said before, in my previous capacity as Director of UN Political Affairs Department, the Israeli Foreign Ministry, I have personally dealt with this issue for 4.5 years. So we're not, it would not come as a surprise. We have some contingency plans. Our approach has been and will remain that the creation of a future Palestinian state has to come as a result of a bilateral agreement with Israel. It cannot be a unilateral, one-sided gesture.
The creation of the State of Israel in 1948 was a unilateral, one-sided gesture. Why do you think it shouldn't be the case with the Palestinians, who have gone through immense suffering? Those are official words from top officials around the world, from the hands of the Israelis, in the name of combating terrorism.
Ever since 1993, it has been the official policy of consecutive Israeli governments to support a two-state solution.
Final thought. Security is to Israel what oil is to Saudi Arabia. What is the future of Israel in 2017?
Israel, unlike virtually any other country in the world, has not suffered a recession for the past 10 years. The Israeli economy is growing at a higher rate than almost any other Western economy. We are a very, very prosperous country now, and there are virtually no security threats to Israel in the Middle East, except terrorism. We are still keeping a watchful eye on Hezbollah, which is getting stronger and stronger, and on Hamas in the Gaza Strip. We are confident that we could contain these security challenges. However, we need to keep a watchful eye because the Middle East has been up in flames since the eruption of the so-called Arab Spring. So this will continue to keep us busy, especially the situation in Syria, the situation in Iraq, and elsewhere, the situation in Libya. We are confident that 2017 will be an even better year for our economy and security than 2016.
Ambassador Ran Gido, thank you very much indeed for being the pioneer guest of Global Watch 2017.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.